In this video, we're going to take a look at the next step on a wing, and that is filling the weave with EkoBond glue. That's 3 parts EkoBond to 1 part water. Before we do that, we're going to clean the fabric, very important. Even though our hands have been clean when I've been working on it, I want to make sure we get the fabric cleaned. These are all the steps that are necessary from finishing the fabric work to moving into the actual top coating. So let's take a look at that, take a look at the cleaning process and how we do that. Let's take a look at the first step we're going to do before we fill the weave. First thing we have to do is we're going to go ahead and clean the fabric. And I'm going to be using EcoClean that's been diluted 15 to 1. And I'm just going to use it in a spray bottle. And I'm going to use a clean rag. We have clean rags like this. We have the lint-free rags in our catalog. These can also be purchased many different locations. Make sure you're using a brand new rag. Don't use a rag that's been laundered. Anytime you put a rag in the dryer has had dryer sheets in there. The dryer sheets have silicone on there. You're going to get silicone infused in your rag, and you're going to be rubbing silicone onto your wing. That would cause all sorts of contaminants later and all sorts of problems. So make sure you use a nice, fresh, clean rag when you do this. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to be cleaning the areas of bare fabric because that's the only areas we're going to be filling the weave with the EcoBond glue later. So I'm just going to go ahead and squirt this on here. And then I'm just going to take the clean rag, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm cleaning the fabric. If you have chalk line on here or anything else from when you did your stitching or anything else you marked, you're going to be taking that off very easily, very quickly. Missed the spot here. I can see where the fabric's still dry. I'm going to do this on the entire wing, all the areas that are bare fabric. And then I'm going to come back with a clean sponge and distilled water and go ahead and clean off any of the residue that is left from the EcoClean. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to clean the whole wing, and then I'll come back and start the rinse process. I've gone ahead and cleaned both sides of the wings with the EcoClean, the 15 to 1 EcoClean. It's all set and ready to go to rinse. I'm going to go ahead and use a clean sponge. I only use this sponge for rinsing EcoClean, nothing else. That way it's not contaminated and hasn't been any other surfaces. When you get a fresh sponge, you really got to work it and rinse it out, rinse it out, rinse it out to get whatever chemicals are in when they process and make the sponge. The water I'm using is reverse osmosis water. We have a setup at our kitchen sink I use for that. You can use distilled water. I personally don't like using regular tap water because I don't know what chemicals are in the water. The process we're doing here is trying to remove anything that might cause a contaminant down the line. So being cautious to make sure they don't introduce any chemicals or any contaminants into the fabric right now, I think is definitely a good move. So all you're going to do is just take your sponge, kind of squeeze it out, and we're just going over the surface and we're rinsing it. Nothing very difficult about that. Rinse it, squeeze out your sponge, go on to the next panel, and so forth. All you're doing is removing any residue of the EcoClean that might be in your fabric. I'm going to go ahead and do the entire wing, and then I'll let that dry. I'll let it dry for a couple of hours, and then I'll come back here and I'll set up, and we'll go ahead and fill the weave, and I'll show you how to mix the EcoBond glue and the distilled water and go on with that particular setup. So I'll just go ahead and I'll continue cleaning, and I'll come back later and do the filling. The fabric has all been cleaned. It's been properly rinsed. It's had a good couple of hours to dry. So we're ready to go ahead and fill the weave with the 3 parts EcoBond to 1 part distilled water. Everything that I'm doing is in our manual. If you don't have the revision 4 manual, please download it. It's available for free on our website, or you can purchase it from us if you want a printed copy. Everything that I'm doing in this particular video is in section 10. And section 10, we'll talk about how to do EkoFill. We'll talk about how to do EkoBond, fill the weave, all the steps that I'm going over in this particular video. This is essential to make sure that you're following everything that's necessary for the STC. Let's take a look at the tools that we're using and what I'm using to fill the weave. I've gone ahead and I've used my scale and I've measured out 8 ounces of EkoBond glue, and I've got 2.6 ounces of water. It's 3 parts glue, 1 part water by weight. So I'll go ahead, I'll just mix these. I like to put my water in a separate cup first because it's hard with the big container to pour water and control it. I can go back and forth and empty this out a little bit and then get exactly what I want and pour it in there. I'll then go ahead and take a paint stir stick, or anything that's good and clean, and I'll go ahead and I'll clean, and with the clean stick, I'll go ahead and stir this. And you'll notice when you do this, because you've been working with the glue, that the color will change and the viscosity will change dramatically. And now it's very, very runny compared to the thick glue that we've used before. I'll go ahead and set this paint stick aside. And I'll move my scale. The application that I'm going to do is done with a foam brush. Foam brush works really good for this. I can go ahead and work this into the fabric nice and neatly. I've gone ahead and moved my wing horizontal. Just works a little bit nicer so I don't get a lot of running down inside the wing. Wouldn't cause a problem on the surface. Sometimes you have to do it with the vertical, but if possible, I like to do it horizontal. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take my 3:1 EkoBond on the foam brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and work it into the fabric with the foam brush. And you'll see it starts to bead up and bead through the fabric. So I know I'm getting enough on there. I know I'm properly filling the weave. This is a mechanical bond, so the sealing of the weave, the glue needs to penetrate into the fabric and lock into that fabric. You can see it's not a difficult process. There's a lot of wing area I have to do, so it'll probably take me about a half hour to do the whole wing, but the process is not difficult. Now, the reason for sealing the weave with the EkoBond, EkoBond is completely impervious to water. By sealing the weave with the EkoBond glue and then putting our EkoFill on top, our EkoFill will not have any issues with moisture getting into the dry EkoFill, because it will be encapsulated between a layer of the EkoBond glue, which is waterproof, and the top coat, which is also waterproof. Both are impervious. Dripped a little in here. The key with the UV protection, the key with the EkoFill, which we're going to be putting on after this, is to keep it dry at all times. Again, you've got moisture that's going to come in through openings in your wing. You got moisture that's going to come in through inspection rings. You've got moisture that's going to come in different areas of your wing. When that moisture gets in there, you don't want it to be able to penetrate into the EkoFill. That could possibly cause some delamination. By sealing the weave first with the glue, it makes it completely impervious. You're not going to get any moisture down into the EkoFill later. So the EkoBond seals the weave, makes the moisture so it cannot penetrate up into the EkoFill, and the top of the EkoFill, of course, is protected by the EcoPoly Premium on top. So it creates that impervious layer. It's completely encapsulated. The EkoFill is completely encapsulated into waterproof membranes. I'm going to go ahead and continue and do the entire wing, and when I'm all done, I'll show you how it looks. You'll notice I'm only putting the 3:1 on the bare fabric. There's no need to go ahead and put another coat on your tapes or anywhere else that you've got already have glue on there, because that weave is already completely filled with the glue. So we're just putting it on the bare fabric. And again, I can see this very nicely beading through my fabric. You can see I did this little section over here. And I'm just working on this. I sometimes go different directions, different one panel then another panel. And you see I do kind of work back and forth just to make sure I'm really working it into that weave. Make sure I'm getting it filled in there. You can see this isn't a time-consuming step. Probably take me about a half hour or so to apply this to the entire wing. We just do one application, one coat. Again, I'm just going back and forth a little bit just to make sure I get it into the weave nicely. I will do one side of the wing, let it set about a half hour, and then I'll do the other side just so that it doesn't have any issues with running if I flip it over. As you can see, I've gone ahead and finished filling the weave with the 3-to-1 EkoBond. And at this point, this is where you go ahead and inspect the wing carefully. Any bubbles you have, any areas where tapes are not down properly, that's where you can go ahead and get the iron, set the iron at 230 degrees, and lay those bubbles down. Let me flip this over and look at the other side and see how it looks also. Let's go ahead and take a look at the top side of the wing. This did set overnight. I finished it yesterday, and it set about 10 hours, so it's good and dry. Let's take a quick walk around and see what we can find. I did notice on this side some runs, and when you look at the runs, they look pretty bad. However, when you touch the runs, they are completely inside the fabric and will not cause any issue whatsoever. It's just where the EkoBond dripped on the inside as it puddled through the fabric. So again, walking around, sorry about the glare from the light. Here's a look at the wingtip and inspecting that, inspecting all the tapes. I don't see any bubbles. I don't see any issues, anything that I need to worry about. So it looks like we're in really good shape. I did find a couple of areas where I've got some bubbles that I want to dress with the iron. I've got the iron set at about 200, 235 degrees. And where I've got these little bubbles, these little spots where I know there's a little bit of air underneath, I'll just go ahead and take the iron and I can go ahead and I can smooth those out. And at this temperature, it'll soften the glue. It'll lay that down nicely, removing any bumps, but it will not soften the glue enough where it'll get all over the iron. So I just run the iron across there, check it, feels nice and smooth. Anywhere else I've got any little bumps, I can go ahead and I can smooth those out. And this is the time to do it. It's a lot easier to do this now rather than after the EkoFill is on. You can do this with the EkoFill also, but it does have a tendency more to soften the EkoFill and make a little bit of a mess that you have to then retouch up with the EkoFill. So again, just check over your wing. Any areas where you've got any little bubbles, just lay them down nice and smooth with the iron. And you can see it's not picking up anything onto the bottom of the iron at all, nice and clean. Also, if you've got any tapes that are at all rough, you can go ahead and just take your iron and go over those tapes lightly, and that will help to lay those down also. So it's a pretty easy process. This is all in preparation for the EkoFill. Okay, I'll finish my inspection, then I'll go ahead and get this ready and get the EkoFill set up. I've gone ahead and moved some things around, and I've got my wing ready in position where I'm going to do my spraying. And you can see I'm just doing it in my open shop. Typically when I do EkoFill, I don't use a spray booth. It's not really necessary. In this particular case, I won't have much overspray, and having the doors open is going to be just fine. You'll notice with the sun in the background, you can see a lot of runs, and we'll kind of come up close here and see. And you can see where that has really gone through. When I did this particular section, I had the wing upright like I have it here. And again, when I touch that, that's completely on the inside of the fabric, will not cause any issues whatsoever with EkoFill. So it looks bad with the sun in the background, but it's really not bad at all. Let's take a look inside the wing and see how that looks. Here's a view that's not very common with most wings. I'm able to go inside the wing through this big wing attach point opening and you can see really nicely the rib stitching. You can see how the weave has been filled, how the EkoBond glue has penetrated very nicely. We have all nice consistent color on the inside. That's what we should see. Next, what I've got here, I've got a foam brush, and I've got a panel that I did previously in another video where I covered a piece of plywood panel. And this panel is in the same status as a wing that has had the weave filled. So this has got glue on it. It is okay to go ahead and put EkoFill on with a foam brush. I prefer spraying it on because with a foam brush, you're going to have a lot more sanding between coats. Sometimes you're just not able to spray. You don't have your spray booth set up. Your shop isn't ready for it. So you have to use a foam brush. Now let's talk about the coating application. You're going to be putting on 3 cross coats of EkoFill to get the full UV protection. One cross coat is 1 horizontal and 1 vertical. That's 1 coat. You can do the same thing whether it's with a foam brush or whether you're going to spray. 1 coat is both the horizontal and the vertical. So if I want to go ahead and do this with a foam brush, I'm just going to take my foam brush. I don't want to get a lot on here, and I'm just going to come up here. Go ahead and get that on there. See, it nicely starts to change the color. You notice I'm not going on the edges yet because if I go on the edges with a fresh load on my brush, it's just going to run all over the place. So I'm going to get this on here. Pretty easy to do. And I'm staying very much to my vertical passes here, so I'm not mixing them up. So I make sure I get the right amount done. So that's half because that's 1 vertical. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do a horizontal. I don't need quite as much of the EkoFill. And once I get the majority of this off my foam brush, then I'm going to come around here and I'm going to do my edges so it doesn't run all over the place. Dripping a little bit on the table, but that's okay. And 1 more edge here. And then on this particular panel, I also want to do EkoFill inside this edge, which I'm going to be painting out later also. You can tape this if you don't want to get the EkoFill on the wood. Depends on whether it's going to be seen or not. And 2 more edges. And then the last thing I like to do is what's called tipping with my brush very straight against the surface of the material. I like to drag my brush very lightly, and all that does is help to remove the bubbles. Now those will flow out. When we come back to this in a few hours, this will be nice and smooth and ready for sanding. We've got a pretty warm day here. It's probably 75, maybe close to 80, so this will dry pretty quick. And that looks good. No bubbles. So that's the application of the EkoFill with a foam brush, in this case on a panel, but you could do it on a wing, you could do it on a control surface. Just understand that if you do all your coats with the foam brush, you're going to get a lot more sanding necessary, and it's going to take you more time. I prefer to go ahead and spray as much as I can, if not all of it. So we'll set this aside, let this dry, and then we'll go ahead and we'll talk about the spraying. Now for spraying, I'm using our DeVilbiss Finish Line 4 gun. And the gun is set up with a 1.5 millimeter tip you'll get, when you get the gun, the kit, it'll come with 3 tips, 1.8, 1.5, and 1.3. The 1.5 can be used for the EkoFill. The 1.3 is the correct tip for the EcoPoly Premium. You can use the 1.3 on the EkoFill also, but you must use the 1.3 only with the top coat. I'm using the 1.5 because I happen to have 2 guns. I keep one gun set up with the 1.5 tip, and I have the other gun set up with the 1.3. So this is all set up. There's a gauge here on the side. This is a final water trap here, and I'll do another video on my compressor and how you can set that up. On the back here, the 2 knobs. This top one is your fan. Have this wide open, and this is your material. Now, when you get your gun, there isn't any indicator mark. You're going to have to file a little mark on here. File it rather than putting it out with Sharpie, because Sharpie might wear off. File a little mark, and I like to open this up just under 1 full turn. So it's about between 3/4 and 7/8 of a turn, and that'll give me the right amount of material flow. When I test this for pressure, on my particular regulator, I've got my regulator behind me set at about 60 PSI, and I go ahead and I set this so that when I trigger this with material flow, I should get 23 PSI. That's the correct amount of pressure for the gun. Now I can do it here without material, and I can see I'm at 23. When I put material in here, I'm going to have to check it again and see if there's a difference between the two. One of the things I've done is I've got a little rack here that I use for hanging my gun. It's just real convenient. That way I can go ahead and I can fill the cup and deal with it that way. Okay, let me go ahead and fill the cup, and then we'll take a look at the process of spraying. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and fill the gun, get it ready for spraying. Don't want to overflow it. That's about half a cup. That'll be a good start. That should give you at least enough for one side of the wing. And put the lid on. Now I can go ahead and test my pressure here. I'll move out of the way so I'm not getting any overspray onto this panel that I just went ahead and did with the foam brush. Everything's all set. We're ready to go ahead and apply the EkoFill and check our gun. You'll notice one addition to equipment that I have here. I have my DeVilbiss respirator on. It's a 2-cartridge respirator. It's essential to wear a respirator whenever you're painting, whether you're using EkoFill, EcoPoly Premium, or primer, any of the paints. What you do not want to do is to be inhaling and tainting the inside of your lungs. We'll go ahead and we'll check the gun first for pressure. And all I'm going to do here is trigger it and make sure I'm at 23 with material flowing. And I am. Last thing I like to do before I shoot anything onto a surface of a wing, I go ahead and I take a piece of cardboard, tagboard, and I check my pattern to make sure I'm going the right way. Make sure my fan is what I want. That's a little light. I'm going to add a little bit more material. That's better. Now the distance I'm going to be shooting is going to be about 8 inches, and the speed is going to be about this fast as we move across, and you'll see that very clearly on the wing. I'll go ahead and I'll do sections at a time, and then do my horizontal and my vertical, then come to the next part, the next part, the next part as we walk through. So let's go ahead and apply the EkoFill. Before you go ahead and shoot any part of your wing, make sure any area that needs to be masked off is masked off or blocked off. You can see I've gone ahead and filled these areas where the inspection areas, the inspection covers are going to be covering. I'm going to go ahead and do these couple panels right here, and then we'll see the process. I like to start with my leading edge first, get my edges so I make sure I get enough on there. Very good here. Cut this up just a little bit.
Okay, now I'll do my first pass. And my gun is set correctly. Here, this is our first horizontal pass. Not a lot of coverage. We want this light. We don't want any gloss. We don't want any heavy application. I'm just going to come back here and even this out. No gloss. Exactly what we want. And turn the tip. I'm going to go ahead now and do my horizontal or my up and down. Still see a lot of green showing through. With the backlighting from outside, it definitely shows that this first point is very translucent, and that's normal. I didn't get here quite as much as I want. But a little bit more on there so it's even. Want to make sure I got this coat about the same as the first couple panels. Again, there's no gloss. Keep your gun nice and parallel. Don't be sweeping like this. Keep it nice and parallel, very robotic motion. Your distance stays consistent.
Okay, you can see that one side of the wing is completely done with one cross coat of EkoFill. That's one horizontal, one vertical. I'll go ahead and flip this over and I'll do the other side.
Okay, let's go ahead and get the wingtip. Zoom over here. Nice and even. It's a lot different with the back side already done in EkoFill. Here's my tip again. Last section here. And plenty of material. As I'm doing this, I'm right at 23. Maintaining my pressure very nicely. Critical. If the compressor can handle it, then we're done with spraying. Alright, switch directions here. I'm going to go ahead and get my leading edge a little bit more. Tend to miss that sometimes.
And there we have it. The first cross coat of EkoFill is done. All the way across. Done both sides. I did extra on leading edges. Real happy with the way that came out. What I'll do is I'll check this in a few hours, see how dry it is. It should dry pretty quick. It's pretty warm today. And I'll go across and check all my tapes. There's a few tapes I noticed that were up a little bit that I need to lay down. It's looking good. We'll come back in a few hours and see how it looks. This first coat of EkoFill has had a couple hours to dry. It's nice and warm in here, so I can go ahead and inspect it and see what the next step will be. First thing I notice on this wing, which is very obvious, is right here. I've got a taped edge that's up. That's pretty common to find. It's an area that it's just simply I missed this before I went ahead and did my EkoFill. So all I'm going to do is take an iron, and I've got my iron set at about 235 degrees. And I'm just very lightly going to go ahead and lay these tapes down. Those should bond right on down. There we go. Lays those down very nicely. At this temperature, it doesn't cause any issues melting the EkoFill. Now those are nice and smooth, nice and laid down. And I'm going to find other areas like that. There's just small spots. Here's another one. Very common. And what you want to do is very carefully inspect your whole wing. And any areas where you see some taped edges, where the pinks might be up a little bit, just very lightly take the iron and run over the edge. Very easy to do. And I'm sure there's others, and I'll just keep inspecting the wing. And I've come across a couple of others. This one's real obvious. Just lay this back down. Another one. These are up a little bit. Very easy just to take the iron and lay these tapes down before I do any sanding or any other work on the wing. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to inspect the entire wing, and once I get all the loose tapes or any tapes that are up, once I get those laid down, then I'm going to go ahead and go over the entire wing with some red Scotch-Brite and get it prepped for the next coat of EkoFill. The entire wing has been gone over with an iron, and all I did was just very lightly and gently go over across all the pinked edges, make sure they're all laid down. There were a few that were specifically up. Next step will be go ahead and take the red Scotch-Brite and lightly go over the entire surface of the wing before I get ready to put on the next coat of EkoFill. With all the tapes inspected and all the tapes laid down, I simply went ahead and laid down all these tapes to smooth them out. Now the next step is to go ahead and take red Scotch-Brite and just simply go over the entire wing. You can use 320 grit sandpaper. I happen to like red Scotch-Brite, how it works. And basically all I'm going to do is just lightly smooth out the surface. This is when you can determine whether or not your EkoFill is dry. If it comes off as more or less dust rather than balls, you know that the surface is nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead, lightly go over the entire wing with the red Scotch-Brite. Then I'll go ahead and blow it off, go over it with a tack rag, and then I will be ready to go ahead and put on my second cross coat of EkoFill. So I'll just go ahead and do the entire wing and get it ready for EkoFill, the next step, the next cross coat. I'm just about done prepping this wing for the next coat of EkoFill, next couple cross coats. And you can see some areas where the green is starting to show through, where I did some Scotch-Briting and a little bit of 320 sanding to smooth out some surfaces. I did find lots of little tapes that I needed to adjust, and we'll take a look at a couple of those close up here so you can see what I like to take care of during this phase. It's kind of hard to see in this close-up, but you can see right here I've got a tape that I don't particularly like. I'm just going to take that iron and just lay that down a little bit. Iron set at 230 degrees. Little spot there. And that's real common. When I find little spots like that, I just go ahead and very carefully iron them out so that everything is all nice and smooth before I put on my next coat of EkoFill. The majority of the work that I've done on this stage is done with Scotch-Brite. Because I sprayed the surface, sprayed the EkoFill on, there's very little work involved. It's just a matter of smoothing out, especially around tapes, around stitching, getting those areas smoothed out. Not difficult to do. Again, by spraying this, we don't have any issues. We've got a lot of work to do. If you were to do this with a brush, the amount of work involved would be probably 4 or 5 times as much work, and you would not get the finish nearly as smooth. This wing is done at this point and ready for the second coat of EkoFill. I've sanded everything. I've gotten all my tapes down where necessary. Everything is smoothed out. There's a few areas that are a little bit green, and I will make sure I put a little bit more EkoFill on that during my second coat. For the most part, it's ready. At this point, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and blow off the surface. I'll clean it real carefully, tack rag it, and then go ahead and spray on the next coat of EkoFill. And we'll take a look at how that looks after that coat is on. My first cross coat of EkoFill is all done on this wing. I let it set overnight and came back and did some sanding. I went over this the entire wing with 320 grit sandpaper and red Scotch-Brite. Red Scotch-Brite is great to get around the tapes and so forth and around the stitching, and 320 in some of the larger areas. This also gave me the opportunity to check all my tapes and make sure they were all nicely bonded down to the surface. You're always going to find some tapes, the pinks that were popped up that you didn't have them down quite right. When you notice that, just come back with your iron, set your iron at about 230, 240 degrees, and just very lightly go over those tapes. And I showed that a little earlier, how I set those down. That way you've got them all down and you're ready for your second application. You can see here I've got some green exposed. That's common during the first cross coat of EkoFill. I'll just go ahead and I'll hit those first before I go ahead and put on my cross coat. That will be my second application. I went ahead and I blew the surface off and used a dusting rag to get all my dust off and make sure everything is nice and clean. I have this little panel that I did with my foam brush. I'm also going to spray that. Whenever you use a foam brush, you're going to have about 5 times the amount of sanding. Very difficult to get out the marks from the foam brush when you put on EkoFill. It's why we really recommend you do your EkoFill with a spray rather than with a foam brush. An application like this, a small panel, it's very common. You'll have a small control surface or you have a small door or something that you're ready to put EkoFill on. You're not set up for spraying right now. You just want to get it coated so you can store it till you're ready to spray. That's what I would recommend on a small piece only using a foam brush. For everything else, you want to spray on your 3 coats of EkoFill. It'll lessen the workload dramatically. So we're all set to go. This is all clean, like I said, ready. It's been blown off and so forth. And I've checked my gun with material flowing. It's at 23 PSI. So we're ready to go. We'll go ahead and we'll spray this wing and get our second cross coat on.
Before I go ahead and do the wing, I'll shoot this little panel. I've gone ahead and I've taped my backside. And I'll go ahead and I'll just spray this inside lip. And I'll go ahead and I'll flip this over. Okay, that's all set. I'm going to get this out of the way, then we'll come back and hit the wing. And I'm going to hit some of these green areas first, just so they've got a little bit more material before I do my cross coating on here. This is just so that I've got more consistent color. On just the areas that were a little bit greener. Gone ahead and hit all the light areas. Everything's a little more consistent now. I can go ahead and I can do my regular cross coat just like I did before. Cross coat again is a horizontal followed by a vertical. That's one cross coat. We need 3 of those for total UV protection. So we'll go ahead and we'll get the next cross coat on here. It's about the right speed. Distance is about right. You see my overlap. I'm still not getting a gloss. I don't want a gloss finish on here. Nice even pattern. Keep that gun nice and parallel with the surface. Change my pattern here. I'll go up and down. I'll do the next bay since I already have the gun set for the up and down motion. Saves my little bit of time. You notice my compressor, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's not on. There it goes. It's not running the whole time. I can visually check my sensor gauge. I'm maintaining 22 PSI. Go down a little bit. Again, my material is open at 1, same as my first coat. Go ahead and turn this. And I'm doing this in my open garage again. I've got plenty of airflow in here. I'm not worried about overspray. Don't need to worry too much about dust since I'm going to be sanding clean coats anyway.
Second cross coat of EkoFill is done, and I'm happy with the finish. I can still see a few spots where I need to iron my tapes down a little bit better. I like to wire them down between every coat and make sure they're nice and flat. You can see there's no green showing now. It's a nice consistent gray color from the EkoFill. Looks really good. I don't have any runs. I don't have any dust marks. I don't have any insects on it. It looks really good. So from this point, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll go over the whole thing again with Scotch-Brite. I'll check all my tapes. Any spots where I have some tapes sticking up, I'll hit those again with the iron at 230, 240 degrees, get those laid out, and then I'll go ahead and I'll spray on one more cross coat of EkoFill. Once I'm done with that, one more application with the red Scotch-Brite, and then I'm ready, in this particular case, for white primer. I'm putting on the white Eco Prime, the single part primer on top of the gray, because I'll be putting a silver metallic on top, and that'll just give me a good base color. So that's it for putting on the EkoFill. Gives you a good understanding of how to fill the weave first with the Ekobond glue, followed by putting on the cross coats of the EkoFill. We do 3 complete EkoFill cross coats. I've done 2, so I have 1 more to go, but it'll essentially be exactly the same as what I've done here. That's it for the application of EkoFill. Just want to stress again, make sure if you don't have it, you download or get a copy of our revision 4 manual. Everything that I've done on filling the weave with the Ekobond and then going ahead and doing the EkoFill is in the manual. It's essential that you have this and follow it for the STC and for any of the applications that you're using our product for.